Power hammers, anvils, and belt grinders. Join us as we explore the hobby of video game CEO Trent Oster and nerd out about blacksmithing, knives, and Damascus steel. Welcome to Tales Under the Cat Tree. I'm your host, Dupes, and these are tales by humans for humans. After all, words and stories are what give meaning to the worlds we live in. From ancient times to today, gods and humans have hammered red-hot metal into shapes of weapons and things of beauty. In ancient Greek mythology, Hephaestus, and in fantasy, beings such as Sauron, forged their ultimate weapons in the insane heat at the heart of volcanoes. Without human blacksmiths, who were the technologists of their day, we would not have the tooling and the world building that have brought us here today. However, in our present day, we take machined metalworking for granted. We don't think twice about stainless steel knives in our kitchens. What were once luxury goods can now be bought for pennies in thrift stores. But the art of true blacksmithing survives and is even experiencing sort of a renaissance. I'm reminded of this every year when Helsinki placed host to the world's largest community-produced role-playing convention, Ropicon. Last year, a local blacksmith had his beautiful knives available, and I picked up a stunning, functional blade that has been my go-to cooking knife all year. Watching a traditional blacksmith work is mesmerizing. The process is anything but simple. It is immensely physical. Heated metal is pounded, tweaked, and otherwise worked with any number of torturous-looking implements to produce something both practical and beautiful. When I was watching a blacksmith work in his forge, it reminded me that I have a friend and former colleague whose hobby is this most ancient and practical of arts. If you know video games, then you certainly know some of the titles that my friend has worked on and helmed. I am talking about none other than Trent Oster. Trent and I worked together at BioWare, where he was a founding member as well as project director and producer when I was helping with Neverwinter Nights. These days, he is the CEO of Beamdog. Aside from its own intellectual properties such as Mythforce, Beamdog has been instrumental in bringing Dungeons & Dragons games such as Baldur's Gate, Planescape, Torment, and even Neverwinter Nights back as enhanced editions that run on modern computers. But today, Trent and I will not be talking about video games. Many of us in the tech industry have hobbies which we take to extremes of all kinds. Mine include writing and photography, but Trent's is on a scale of power hammers, steel, and red-hot chemistry. This is a dense discussion on smithing, knife making, and the wonders of metallurgy. In the show notes, I've added pictures of the knives he has produced and that we talk about. I've also included a video of Trent's power hammer, the machine that he affectionately calls Thumpy. But let's get down to it. Here's Trent and I talking about metals, smithing, and knives.
Hi, I'm Trent Oster. I'm the CEO of Beamdog. I've been in video game development for 31 years, and I don't want to talk about any of that.
So we met while I was working at BioWare and you were doing all sorts of video games. And like I said, we're not going to talk about video games. We're going to talk about another passion of yours, which I find incredibly fascinating because it's also incredibly beautiful. And what is that passion that we're going to talk about?
So as a hobby, a while back, I picked up blacksmithing. The origin story is kind of weird. I had rented a shop space with my former business partner, Cam Topher, who has since retired. And we were doing a solar startup where we created a tracking array that would track the sun. I rented this shop and I built this physical thing. And Cam's job was to build the control software. Only Cam never really built the control software. So while I was waiting, I got the shop space. I'm like, hey, I just want to do blacksmithing. Well, if I'm a blacksmith, I need a forge. Okay, I'll build a forge. So I did a bunch of looking on the internet. How do you build a forge? Okay, so I built a little forge.
Wait. You built a forge. You didn't go buy a forge. You decided to build a forge.
So I bought a forge later when I understood why I should have bought a forge in the first place. But I built one. And naturally, I saw the designs out there and I'm like, I can do better than that. I need a bigger forge. I'm going to forge axes and shit. So the forge is basically, you want a volume that's wrapped up in ceramic wool as an insulator, so you can get ridiculously high temperatures and not be setting everything around it on fire. And then typically you have like some kind of brick on either end of it to keep it closed up because you want to keep the heat in that space. It was a stainless steel shell. I put the ceramic wool inside, used a spray-on rigidizer, which hardens it up so that the wool's not breaking apart, and then coat it with a ceramic coat. And I built what in blacksmithing is referred to as pipe fitting burner. So you basically take a whole bunch of pipe fittings and you assemble them together, and then you blow propane down the center of it, and it draws air with it, and then that's what you combust in the forge itself. So I built to these pipe fitting burners, and I built my forge, and everything was pretty cool. And it would run for about 10 minutes. And then the propane bottle, I was using 20 pounders, it would start to freeze up. Because what's happening is the propane is evaporating, and then you're burning the vapor. So that actually draws heat out of everything around it. So after 10 minutes, the bottle would freeze up. So I ganged two of them together, and then I got 20 minutes before it froze up. So then I put the two in buckets of water. So then I got it surviving about 40 minutes before it started to shut down. So at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm doing the basics of blacksmithing. I'm going to find a local blacksmith and I'm going to pay him for one day, and we're going to work together, and he's going to tell me the bad habits I'm starting to form so I can fix them before they take hard root. So I found a local blacksmith, Sean, from Fred Step Forge, and we worked together for a day. And he showed me a lot of kind of hammer technique and a lot of really almost like shortcuts on stuff. And a lot of what he did was almost like giving permission. He's like, look, blacksmiths were the technologists of their day. When they found a new way to do something that was faster, they did it. They weren't worried about tradition. They weren't worried about, oh, this is the way we do it. It's like, now, if you can throw something in a vise and just grab it with a wrench and straighten it out easier than beating on it for 10 minutes, do it. At the same time, Sean built his own forges, and his forges were about 5 times as efficient as mine. So not only did they burn a lot less propane, they didn't freeze out and stop working after 40 minutes. So I wound up buying one of Sean's forges, and that's what I'm still using today.
You do realize you sound a little bit like a crazy mad scientist. I just want you to know, get me more propane.
Well, whenever I run into a problem, I'm like, okay, I got to solve the problem. I'm going to solve the problem. Well, we'll just start multiplying propane supplies. So today I run 100-pound propane bottles. They are about 4.5 feet tall, and they're a little under 2 feet in diameter. They put out a lot of propane.
So how hot these days do you work with, like in terms of the max temperatures that you get inside one of these things?
Yeah, I think the forge internal at peak, like when I'm pushing hard and trying to weld stuff together, probably in the 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit range. So what's really cool is I use a ceramic coating on the inside of the forge, and it reflects a ton of heat. And then I've got this like little window in the front where I'm literally, I just slide in bricks, and I slide a brick out to open up the opening bigger if I need, or smaller if I can get away with it. And you can be standing 10 feet back and you can feel when you walk in front of it, because it's essentially, it's like an infrared laser, and you can feel it when you walk by. You're like, oh, I'm in the beam, out of the beam, in the beam, out of the beam. And it's pretty intense.
What are the pieces that you've made that really stick with you, and the ones that you're most proud of at this point?
That is a good question. So I've made, mostly right now I'm doing chef's knives, because I think chef's knives are this really elegant balance of functional artwork. They're beautiful and they're really, really, really fun to look at. But at the same time, they're a useful tool that you can use to prep food. I have all sorts of knives in my office here, and really I probably shouldn't, but so this is an old one that I made. So this one is, you can see kind of the spotted pattern in it. So this is actually this is what I call it. It's a canister Damascus.
So this is Damascus steel. Is that what
Damascus
that is?
It's kind of a misnomer. It's more of a pattern welded steel is the proper name for it. There was a city called Damascus where the locals built steel, and it just so happened that a lot of the things in the local ore contributed to all sorts of unexpected properties. Like even today, they're still figuring out how Damascus steel from way back was so good. Some of the latest research says was actually carbon nanotubes in it, unintentionally in like ancient history. That's crazy. What people currently refer to as Damascus steel is pattern welded. It typically means you take two dissimilar steels, usually one with a higher nickel content than the other, and you weld them together. And when you're done the welding process, it looks like one piece of steel until you etch it with an acid. The nickel resists the etch. The metal without the nickel actually gets eaten into by the acid and turns black. It generates iron oxide type 3, which is, it's very dark, very black, and it'll stain your hands for like weeks. Trust me, I know. But it looks really cool because the nickel stuff resists the etch, so it remains higher up, and the etched metal gets eaten in. So then you take really high grit sandpaper, and it just polishes the nickel, and it leaves the black alone. So you get this really nice contrast pattern.
So these are the knives that I have and that I see, which are, has these black and silver patterns.
Yeah, they've got little waves. So I have an elvish dagger here that I made, and I don't know, you can kind of see the pattern in it.
For those who can't see this, I'm going to have pictures on the show notes. How long does it take to make, for example, that elvish dagger?
So this one was a pain in the ass. So this took a long time, partly because I didn't quite understand how I was going to grind it. So because it's got such a curve to the blade and it's got this undercut right here. So in order to make the undercut, I had to kind of figure out, because grinding is done on a belt grinder. So it's a 2-inch wide by 6-foot long belt. And you have various grits. Typically I start at a 36 grit, and you go all the way up to, I think the highest I've got in my shop is 3,000. The 36 grit, it hogs hard. Much like everything else, I built my belt grinders. I have 2 of them. Did a bunch of research on them. I'm like, oh, belt grinder, pretty cool. Yeah, lots of guys run 1 horsepower belt grinders. Some guys run 1.5 horsepower belt grinders. The high end is the 2 horsepower belt grinder. So I built a 2 horsepower belt grinder, and it was pretty good. But it could be better.
You're literally starting to sound like the guy from Home Improvement. More power!
So I built a 3 horsepower. My 2 horsepower runs a drive wheel that's about 4 inches in diameter. So my 3 horsepower runs a 7-inch diameter drive wheel. Roughly calculated out, that belt's doing about 90 miles an hour. It is flying. And occasionally they will explode. Like the belt will just rip out. And when it smacks you, it's like a good punch. Like you just get slapped by this thing that's incredibly scratchy. I got one, and for about a week and a half, I had a bruise and a big kind of cut where it whacked me.
So you take these plates, you beat down, you weld the plates together in the heat.
So the welding process is I basically stack the plates dry, and then I take a TIG welder and I melt a little bead on each side, which holds them together. Then I throw them in the forge, heat them up, flux them with borax. So the borax stops the metal from oxidizing inside, because oxidized steel will not weld to steel. You heat it up until it is glowing bright yellow, hot, probably right around 2,000, 2,100, 2,200 degrees. And then you take it over to the anvil and you give it a couple hard smacks with a hammer to start to set the weld. And you throw it back in the heat it back up, back over, smack, smack, back in the heat. And you can hear it. You can hear as the plates coalesce and start to form up solid. And when they're tight together, you can start actually doing hard manipulation on it. So at that point, I moved from using a hand hammer to using either a power hammer or a forging press.
So to get it into the shape that you actually want, this elvish dagger shape that you have.
So first I forge it out into what I call a solid billet. I make sure that the welds are really good. It's coalesced down into one piece of metal. Then I typically cut into a chunk, and then I forge it into, we call it a preform. Preform is really about putting steel where you're going to need it. It almost looks like a 5-year-old drew a version of what you're trying to make and then just kind of crushed it down to a really small version of it. So to make a normal knife, I essentially make a little triangle, and it's fairly thick. And I try to draw down a bit for the heel of the blade. And then when I start forging it out, I start drawing it out, which means lengthening it and thinning it. And then I start manipulating the metal to get the shape out of it I want. Now, I'm okay at forging, but I'm hell on wheels with a grinder. So what I will do is I will rough forge, pretty rough, and then I'll manipulate it to get the shape out of it I want.
I have another friend who is a blacksmith, and at one point he told me that he had enough metal, like little pieces of metal stuck in his arm at some point that it would set off the old metal detectors in the airports. How are you for that?
I usually want to pick that stuff out pretty quick because having metal hang around in you is not a good thing. For the most part, I typically run typical welder clothing, and then I run a dust helmet, but it's basically a full face mask. It has like these two little filters up here, and it's got a fan, and it's blowing cold, clean air through in the front. Because most of the time when you're grinding, you're generating a shit ton of dust.
So you're not setting off metal detectors then? That's good.
No, I try to take care of myself because I want to last a little longer.
You've done swords as well, like big swords. I've definitely seen some beautiful swords that you've done.
So I built this.
It looks like an Excalibur.
As most of the stuff, it is Damascus. It is not sharp, which is why I can put my finger on it. Well, it's sharp at the stabby point, but the blade edge is deliberately dull because it's a sword, man. You don't want to be carrying around something that can murder people. This is all brass. I basically just kind of freehand ground and bent it. And then it's also got the brass pommel, which it really counterbalances the weight nicely. And then just recently I leather wrapped the handle and did it with cord, and it's a good feel. And it's actually surprisingly light. I would bet this entire sword is 6 pounds, maybe 7.
That's surprisingly light.
So the blade is too thin. So if you shake it, you can see it warbles like that. First time I ground a sword, I ground it too thin. Lesson learned, don't grind quite so thin next time. So it's a beautiful ornamental piece. It will cut. I attacked a pumpkin with it, and it hacked the pumpkin in half, even dull, just right through it.
I've seen, obviously, the katanas and stuff like that, Japanese steel. Have you made one of those or tried one of the folded steel that they talk about? I don't know how that actually works, to be honest, Trent. It just looks beautiful.
Sean Cunningham, the guy who trained me, he's a big katana guy, big traditionalist, forges that stuff, has visited Japan numerous times, has had people come over and do forging clinics here and did it like the old way with I forget the exact words, like Tegamahani steel. So Japanese steel is actually poor. Like their sources of steel were poor. They basically were using almost like an iron sand that they were extracting iron out of. And as a result, they didn't have a lot of high carbon steel. So high carbon steel is basically any steel which comes in about 0.06 to 0.1% carbon. So the carbon allows you to harden the steel. God, it's going to get complicated here. So martensite is a crystalline form of carbon steel that is hard. Austenite is unhardened steel. So when you heat treat your steel, you are basically heating it up to allow the carbon to go into solution, and then you are essentially freezing it and freezing the carbon in that solution, which is what martensite is. So the Japanese steel didn't have a lot of carbon. So what they would do is they would concentrate the carbon on the cutting edge when they forged it out. So they would actually do all the folding to specifically get the hardenable steel in a form that they liked it. Probably didn't do this all the time, but the dominant form was to essentially build we call it a taco. So you basically make a U shape out of the milder steel, which has some carbon in it, but not as much as the hardened edge. And then you put the hardened edge in there and you forge weld it all together into one piece. This becomes the spine of the blade, and the tip, the sharp cutting edge, is up here, and it's the hardenable steel sticking out. So Japanese swords are typically made trying to conserve that high carbon steel as much as you can. By mixing the two disparate steels, you get kind of a combination of a really hard, high quality cutting edge, but you get essentially the toughness of the softer steel. So it's a good balance that'll hold it together.
So really, what you're saying is ultimately this technique was created simply because they didn't have good quality steel that they could, or good quality sources of ore. So they had to actually kind of create it.
Japan is a land of insane level craftspeople. So like in the West, if we had bad steel, we probably wouldn't have made anywhere near the same progress. Like when you look at the skill these guys are bringing and the dedication and the hours and just the focus that they can bring to stuff, it is staggering. That said, the steel quality we have available today is so much better.
You and I love fantasy games, and we've played probably more fantasy games than we actually want to think about in our lives. So a lot of swords and knives and things like that come from the world of fantasy.
This dagger, its form is very, very close to Aragorn's dagger from The Lord of the Rings, the movie. I looked at that shape and I'm like, I want something like that shape. It fits the hand really nice, man.
As you said, blacksmithing was a technological marvel of the time. I mean, this was a thing that allowed people to, spread as wide as possible, I'm sure, in some way, right?
So many tools got made. Like,
how do you think humans actually figured this shit out?
Trial and error, man.
And have you seen that process in yourself as you've been doing this? Like,
I joke about my tool to product ratio. I probably spend 80% of my time building tools and 20% building the final product. Because every time I'm building something, I have an idea on how I could make a tool that could make this better, or how I could make a tool that could take the time to do X process and shrink it way down. So I spend a ton of time building tools, and a lot of my tools are, by revision 3, they're pretty good. Revision 1 sucks monkey balls, man. It's like an arms race, man. Every time I try to do a new thing, I'm like, oh God, by revision 7, it won't suck.
So how long have you actually been doing this now?
Probably about 7 years now. I mean, I was really intense off the start. And then the last couple of years, I really slowed down because it's a hobby to me. It's something I want to enjoy. And I started making knives, like chef's knives, and I started selling them. I'd walk into the shop and I'd feel an obligation that I had to make something. And I was like, no, my shop's not about obligation. My shop is about me going to burn off some stress and to just do something by myself. Because I'm in the video game industry. To make a video game requires a whole lot of people, a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of coordination. And it's brutal because to do anything, you need 5-10 people. And to do anything big, you need 100 people. And that annoys the shit out of me because I can only progress at the slowest rate of the slowest person. Whereas if I'm in my shop, I'm there to do something by myself. And I can move as fast as I want or as slow as I want.
What have you learned from doing this, having this hobby, what most people might consider kind of a little bit of an insane hobby, considering, you are kind of making weapons and putting them
beyond
through.
That. It's like I am literally playing with fire and stabby things, and there are metal shards shooting off everywhere. And so it's kind of hilarious from that respect. Key learnings, investing in tooling is usually worth it. But your first idea on how a tool should work is probably wrong. So by building the first tool, you understand why you need to build a second tool. And then by revision 4 or 5, you sorted most of the big issues out. I think the second thing I learned is it's just kind of my general life attitude. I look at something and I'm like, that looks cool. I could do that. How hard could it possibly be? And the answer is always, holy shit, it's hard, but it's worth it. Because that's how you learn. And to me, it's learning and figuring out stuff. That's the engaging stuff.
I one day would like to see you do this, wearing as much protective gear as I can possibly happen, because I am accident prone. And if there's something bad that's going to happen to dupes, it's going to happen to dupes. So
the hilarious thing about a 90-mile-an-hour belt with 36 grit on it is it can eat steel like it's going out of style. Like I can take a bar and I can just feed it like burp, and it just turns it into sparks.
And if it can eat steel, the rest of...
Oh, yeah. I joke about it. Grinder kisses are the cruelest kisses. Because if it'll eat steel that fast, it eats flesh just as fast.
Way faster.
Oh, yeah.
Any last words for the podcast audience about your knives? And do you have a website that you have these posted up on?
I had a website and like, really? I do this for fun. I have a list of people who have asked me to have a knife. I closed the list a couple years ago because I got like 3 years behind on production. And I'm slowly ticking my way through my list. I'm not going to have a website on it. I'm just going to post shit on Facebook once in a while because I get a kick out of it. And I'm like, hey, here's the thing I made. It's kind of cool. I like it. Maybe you like it. Maybe you don't. Generally, if you have one of my knives or if you're on the list, it's because I like you.
And with that, Trent.
This is the problem is I could keep talking on this forever.
No. This is. I think what to me is what one of the most fascinating things is I've known you for a very long time now at this point. I love the passion that you have for this hobby. It reminds me of the passion I have for my hobbies. And I just love people who work at different things, but their hobbies aren't just, you just do something for 5 minutes. It's literally get knee deep into this and go hard.
Shit gets obsessive.
Exactly.
When you were reading a book written by a PhD about metallurgy and thinking about microcrystalline structure, you're pretty far down the rabbit hole.
To be fair, Trent, when you're building your own forge, you're pretty far down the rabbit hole. I'm not entirely sure the book is the problem at this point. But hey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure, and I will have as many photos as you will give me of the pieces that you've done on the podcast show notes so that people can see it. And if people want to really get into the idea of metallurgy themselves and making knives and stuff like that, I'm sure there are YouTube videos and stuff.
There's a ton of really skilled, really talented people out there who do similar stuff to what I do. My only unique identifier is that I'm a video game CEO who also forges knives. I do not make perfection. I make knives that have flaws. They have weak spots. There's a grinding mark here. There's a rough spot there. I see that. I see the imperfection and I'm like, that's okay. It's a handmade piece of artwork. A little imperfection is fine. That said, I'm pretty anal about it. And so part of my process is I make a knife. When I'm done, I sharpen it. I take it to my house. I cook with it. I cook with it at least 2 or 3 meals and just seeing how it performs. When I am happy, I take it back to the shop and I etch in my maker's mark. And then once I've got the maker's mark on it, I clean it all up. I put it in a box and I send it to the person. Let's just say the happy knives that have gone out versus the reject pile. The reject pile is pretty goddamn big at this point.
But that is the way of hobbies. Trent, again, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
It's always good talking to you, man.
A big thank you to Trent Oster for coming on the show and spending some of his valuable time talking about his hobby. One day I'm going to have to visit his shop and see him work. As I mentioned in the intro, please head over to the show notes at tales.dupes.ca, that's tales.dups.ca, for the pictures and videos that Trent provided. I spent a bit of time thinking about our world, how we as a species discovered metalworking and how impactful it has been on our society and civilization. What would have happened had our forebears not learned how to work with steel and iron? I guess these are things of fantasy and science fiction for us now. It did remind me of reading Raymond D. Feist's Magician when I was a child in the 1980s. He also co-wrote the Empire trilogy with Janny Wirtz, which is set in the world that was invading magicians, Midkemia. In that world, there was a dearth of metals, so they had to work with special types of wood, and hence their invasion of Midkemia. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Listen to the archives wherever you get your podcasts or at tales.dupes.ca. This podcast is about the worlds we create, the realities we conjure, and the wonders of the human imagination. Do you have any comments about this or any other episode? Please get in touch at contact@dups.ca. That's contact@dupes.ca. This podcast, including its intro music, is produced, edited, and created by Dilip Ujewardena. Give your pets a cuddle until we meet again for some tales under the cat tree.
I stab myself with it and I'm like, that's annoying. I'm not going to do that in the next one. And I quit doing it and I start doing it again.